After crossing town, they get to Glasnevin. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, and sometimes it's referred to as Prospect Cemetery. I think Glasnevin may be the the area of the park, the whole park, and maybe the cemetery's Prospect. You'll hear both terms in this chapter. It's right near the botanical gardens. Both of them are very worth visiting. Here's some photos from each. Bloom is showing a great interest at the funeral in the family's welfare, the family of Dignam, to see how they're going to take care of themselves. I think Dignam has about 5 kids and a wife that he left behind. So there's this fund that's kind of going forward to try and give them some money until they collect any insurance that Dignam might have had. As they talk, we cut over. I love this transition to show that 2 conversations are taking place that are not united, that they're both out of earshot of each other. There's Bloom talking about the insurance, but then Joyce cuts over to this conversation of Cunningham and Power, who are talking about Bloom's dead father. There are a lot of new characters at the funeral, including this guy, John Henry Menton. Who is this guy? He's kind of a cross, in my mind, between Ebenezer Scrooge, Charles Foster Kane, and Mr. Burns. He's a big man in the community. He has a lot of employees, and one of them was Dignam. So he's at the funeral. I think he might have had to fire Dignam or let him go at some point. I can't remember. But he is still showing up at the funeral and doing his best. He puts in some money to this fund to support Dignam's family. But he doesn't like Bloom. For whatever reason, years and years ago when they first met, I guess Bloom did something when they were playing lawn bowling to embarrass Menton, so he's never liked him. And when he finds out that Bloom and Molly married, he thought Molly was really attractive, but he says of Bloom, "In God's name, what did she marry a coon like that for?" So he's a bit uptight. He's based on Ajax in the Odyssey, who I guess Odysseus and Ajax had some beef about armor or some shit. It's also mentioned that Bloom worked at Wisdom Healy's. This is a store that prints paper and makes stationery, I guess. Bloom was some kind of clerk for about 6 years. Also at the funeral, there is one of the great mysteries of the book. Who is this man who suddenly appears out of nowhere that no one seems to know, whose name is not Macintosh, but who they refer to as Macintosh? Who is this guy Macintosh? What is this guy Macintosh? I have theories, and I will leave them largely for now and bring them up later. Some might consider it the riddle that James Joyce most completely rubs in the reader's face. There's a lot of riddles in the book, but this one you can't miss. I'll present my razor-sharp Warren Commission-like theory on Macintosh later. There's also this guy Hines at the funeral. He's a reporter. He's taking down people's names to say that they were at the funeral. And when he comes up to Bloom, he says, I think he's totally forgotten Bloom's name, but instead of saying, "What's your name?" he goes, "What's your Christian name?" And he says L, or Leopold says L, Leopold. But later on in the newspaper, what we'll actually see is L period boom. Boom! There's this guy, John O'Connell. He tells an amusing joke. This is actually in real life, the person who ran the cemetery at the time the book takes place. Maybe this is the first time that Joyce has really explicitly just taken a character from reality and shoved him in the book. We have, Simon Dedalus and Stephen Dedalus, but the names are changed and there's differences between their real life counterparts. This is just a person that you just threw into the book, though, a real person, this John O'Connell. He's created this interactivity between what is real and what is fiction, as if the two are interchangeable. Bloom's internal monologue resembles his visit to the church in Lotus Eaters. It's very dissecting of the rituals and so on, but he does see that there's a genuine need for that these people have real emotions as they lose their loved ones. After the funeral, some of the men visit some celebrity graves. They go to Daniel O'Connell. I think he's called the Liberator. He is, the parallel is Heracles. He's this ancient figure that seems like almost more than human. And then they also go to Parnell, a more recent figure. you may remember from A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is another real person who, if you don't remember, I'm just going to give you the really brief version, what I remember. I don't claim to be an Irish history expert, but Parnell was a politician who had a great deal of hope. He seemed promising that he might help liberate Ireland from the British Empire. And it seemed like you could do anything, that anything was possible. Simon Dedalus thought he was amazing. A lot of other people did in Ireland. But then this personal affair happened. I think Parnell, if I remember correctly, had an affair with this married woman. So it just disgraced him, and it just took him out of the running in politics altogether. And it was considered just like this downfall of this nearly godlike figure. So some of the men clearly hold that view. We saw that in Dubliners a lot with Ivy Day in the committee room and other places. A lot of terms come up throughout the book, and when they do, if they show up a lot, that's probably a hint that Joyce thinks it's something important, that it's something you should pay attention to. So examples include this Macintosh character. There's references to throwaway throughout the book. There's metempsychosis. In this episode, there's a term introduced called retrospective arrangement. I think with this term, it has to do with how Joyce wants you to read Ulysses. To start assembling composites of characters, stories, incidents, minutiae, seemingly disparate instances that hold a deeper meaning that can only be sussed out through the instance of time, like the universe itself. Speaking of metempsychosis and time, there's this wonderful sentence that gets its own paragraph that is just such a jolting epiphany that Bloom and Joyce and the reader all have at this one moment. It reads, "If we were all suddenly somebody else." But isn't that what time is? To be each moment born anew and able to look back on your former selves and look forward to the infinite possibility of future selves. As we move through matter in time, it's so easy to look back at what we were just seconds or years ago, certainly, as different people, different creatures. I'm well aware of it as I look at my old videos. I have no idea what I'm going to say to them sometimes, and sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. There's a song that shows up that in the book like 3 times. I somehow never realized how prominent it is. It's called "Has Anybody Here Seen Kelly?" Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly. And it's this old Irishy song. You should listen to it. It's pretty good. There's this great description of a person experiencing death and realizing that they're dying, how that might feel or that thought process might take place. Here it goes. "It's the moment you feel. Must be damned unpleasant. Can't believe it at first. Mistake must be. Someone else. Try the house opposite. Wait, I wanted to. I haven't yet." Then darken death chamber. But remember, Bloom escapes from all this, and his final image and sense of self is very life-affirming. Listen how it ends. "Plenty to see and hear and feel yet. Feel live, warm beings near you. Let them sleep in their maggoty beds. They are not going to get me in this innings. Warm beds, warm, full-blooded life."